Hey everyone, it's me, Dr. Whimsy, and today we're having an interesting conversation about the vegan diet and why many people fail at the vegan diet. So a lot of people come to see me because they do want to be vegan, they want to succeed at being a vegan, but we see a really high dropout rate. And so I want to go over some of the things we talk about in my office for those people who do want to be a vegan. And we also want to talk a little bit about some of the benefits if a person is a responsible vegan, if they are eating nutritionally and healthfully. Okay, so the first mistake that I see people making on a vegan diet is that they are not talking to an actual person who knows what they're doing. They're not going and getting medical advice prior to taking on a vegan diet. Instead, they're going on the internet, they're talking to people who are not trained healthcare providers. Even healthcare providers need to get additional training in order to help with diet, particularly something restrictive like a vegan diet. So my first advice to people is to go to a trained professional, a dietitian who specializes in a vegan diet, a nutritionist who specializes in a vegan diet, a naturopathic doctor who knows what to look for in terms of helping to support a vegan diet. If you're really committed to being on a vegan diet, you don't want to hire somebody who's going to argue with you or say, no, you can't do it, it's not a healthy way of life, etc., etc. You need to find somebody who knows what they're doing and understands the benefits of being on a vegan diet. A vegan diet can be very healthful, but it can also be unhealthy depending upon how you do it. So number one is to find a healthcare practitioner that knows how to help you transition to a vegan diet. Number two is biggest mistake is not getting adequate protein. Believe it or not, yes, you can become protein deficient on a vegan diet, and it's actually relatively common to see people who don't know what they're doing that are just starting to eat only vegan foods, but they don't have a nutritionist or a dietitian or naturopath working with them, so they don't know what to eat, and so consequently deficiencies start to happen. And I would say one of the most common is a protein deficiency. One of the ways that many doctors will help support patients transition to a vegan diet is to recommend things like morning smoothies. I certainly do. I put all of my vegan patients on a morning smoothie for breakfast. Sometimes they get tired of that and they'll switch it out with something like a tempeh scramble or something like that. I think that's fine, but the bottom line is that we are monitoring protein, and we want the average person to get about 50 grams, give or take. It depends on the level of activity, the age and gender of the patient, and we take all those things, the physical needs of the patient. All that has to be taken into consideration by the healthcare provider when recommending adequate protein amounts. But number two is, yes, I've seen both in myself when I didn't know what I was doing, when I wasn't getting enough protein. And the first symptom of that is that the person will say, I feel terrible, I feel so weak and awful. And then you'll do some calculations and find out that yes, they don't have adequate protein in the diet. So number two is making sure that we find protein that's going to be easy to digest so that the patient can keep their protein levels up. Number three is not eating enough. So a lot of the times people are fatigued and feel awful because they are running a calorie deficit. They're simply not eating enough. They're used to eating foods that are high in calories, like a cheeseburger, a bacon cheeseburger. One bite is 50 calories? So they fill up very, very quickly. They eat really, really quickly. And with a vegan meal, it's going to be less calories. There's less calories in a head of broccoli than there are in a bacon cheeseburger. So we always want to explain to people that they are going to probably be consuming less calories. And if they go too low on their calories, they're simply not going to have enough energy to do their work. And so they're going to be feeling weak and tired. We want to make sure that we've calculated how many calories they need. And again, determining how many calories a person needs is based on age, gender, level of physical activity, type of health the person has, the individual health needs, metabolism of the individual, etc., etc., etc. Number four is eating too quickly. And this is something that I have talked to people a lot about. And the reason why eating too quickly is a big problem when you're transitioning to a vegan diet is because carbohydrates begin to be digested in the mouth. And this is really a problem if you're eating foods that are high in resistant starches. Now, one of the ways that you can make those plant foods easier to digest, particularly the root vegetables, is if you cook them first and you break down the resistant starches into easier to digest sugars, and then you're going to have less gastric upset. But you have to talk to a patient when they come into my office. If there's one of the first things I will ask is I will ask them how quickly they eat. If they're a meat eater, understand that protein is digested in the stomach with hydrochloric acid and pepsin, whereas carbohydrates are digested beginning in the mouth. You'll see herbivores like cows, they will chew, chew, chew until they've broken down the plant and they've released the sugars from the soluble and insoluble fiber, allowing them to be absorbed as nutrition. So the importance of chewing, this is going to be a problem, particularly in older patients who may not have the best dental care. So that's definitely something that the healthcare provider has to talk to the patient about. Number 6 is relying too much on foods that you actually might be sensitive to. Say, for example, you move to a vegan diet, you move on to a vegan diet, and you don't know what to eat, and you might have had a mild sensitivity to soybeans, for example, but you really didn't discover that you had a sensitivity to soybeans until you started heavily relying on them as a source of protein. And so now you're having gastric upset, you're feeling terrible, you're feeling gas, bloating, and upset stomach because you're eating a food that you are sensitive to. So then you get frustrated because it was your protein source, but you can't digest it. I have also had that happen to me when I went on my journey to improve my health, finding out what I could eat, what I couldn't eat. So number 6, relying on foods that you're sensitive to. Sometimes we do food sensitivity, food allergy testing just to find out what we're dealing with. If the person comes back and they're allergic to soy, then that helps me understand for that particular patient who wants to be vegan that we're just going to move them towards other foods that are high in protein, lima beans, peas, etc. Peas are relatively easy to digest. We can probably put them on a pea protein in the mornings, and they do just fine with that. And I would add to food sensitivities, I would also add junk food. Junk food would be in that category, either foods you're sensitive to or foods that are not healthy for you. They're not healthful. Junk food, barbecued potato chips and beer might be vegan, but it's really not adequate fuel for the human body. So in addition to sensitivities, I would certainly add junk food. Definitely, you don't want to be a junk food vegan. If you are going to be vegan, you want to make sure that the food you're eating is nutrient dense and that you're getting adequate nutrition. Number 7, a very common mistake is to not supplement. Supplementation is an art form. It's something you really have to know what you're doing, and there are doctors that are trained in supplementation, and then there are doctors that are not trained in supplementation. They really don't know what they're doing. So some of the deficiencies that we see in people that decide to go vegan are B12, absolutely, protein, we've mentioned, we do put people on a protein shake usually. Loss of certain types of minerals, particularly in women. If a woman is menstruating once a month, we talk about iron supplementation. We look at bone density, and we want to make sure that we're not seeing calcium lost. That can sometimes happen, so we want to make sure that there's adequate calcium in their vegan diet, and they may want to supplement with a mineral tab. So iron, minerals, calcium, zinc, selenium, just a good multi-mineral is usually what I put patients on, multi-mineral with iron, or they can do the iron separately if they do have extreme deficiency in iron. Vitamin D is a common deficiency as well, and vitamin D is important for immune health and bone deposition as well. And finally, I would just say to the healthcare providers out there that watch this channel that are interested in helping to transition someone towards a vegan diet, and to people who are considering a vegan diet, the the first thing that I do during an initial intake is do a thorough intake about what the health challenges are, why the person wants to be vegan, and then in order to support that, you want to do the intake, you want to do the physical exam, but you also want to get a baseline, which means running labs, making sure we're not looking at any kind of serious underlying health condition that we're going to have to address later on. And you want to do some basic calculations and some basic measurements. You want to do the BMI, of course, the weight and the BMI, and you also want to calculate the percentage of muscle that the individual has, their muscle mass, and their percentage of fat, so that when they come in for their follow-up 3 weeks later, we have the baseline, we have the lab should be in by then, and then we can see how the patient did. Did we see a loss of muscle mass? Did we see an unusual loss of weight? If a person's losing 1 to 2 pounds a week, I'm not concerned, but if we see a huge drop in weight, then that may be an indication that they're actually not eating enough. Alright, so that pretty much wraps up this quick video on why vegan diets fail and how to succeed. If you'd like to find out more about my work, you can go to drwhimsy.com, and I'd love to help you on your journey to health. Thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.